Hi, this is Mr. West, Rossett's most stylish, and today I'm talking about the question 1 from the AS January 2011 paper, His2m Hitler's Germany. And there's a question. I've explained how far the views in source B differ from those in source A in relation to the attitude of German people towards the Nazi regime in 1945. Obviously, in terms of the intro, at first it appears that these two sources differ considerably. Okay, that's certainly my impression, yours might be different. And that leads me nicely and straightforwardly into one side of the argument, how they differ, and the first impressions that are there. Okay, so the first impression is that the tone is very, very different. Source A has a positive tone about the outcome of the war. Still can be won, things can still be gained. However, source B talks negatively about the outcome of the war. So to start with that, my first impressions, and then link into the tone. And then I build on the other aspects of the differences. First of all, about defeat. Now, source B claims that the possibility of defeat brought with it a climate of fear. However, source A claims that Hitler will win the war with a new vengeance weapon. So we can see that the theme is defeat, and then the two sources are saying different things. Linked to that, I can bring in some of my own knowledge. Nazi propaganda stressed the imminent arrival of a vengeance weapon that will build on the success of the V1 and V2. Another theme that differs is opinions on the regime. Okay, source A is positive, believing Hitler will still win the war. It's sort of claiming that the Hitler myth is intact. However, source B is negative, claiming that the reports of the SD received were unmistakably critical. I can bring some more knowledge on this. Ian Kershaw estimates that only 10% of the German population still supported the Nazis in the last months of the war. So that would link with that. But also, the author Speer is rightly surprised as many believe that the Hitler myth was in tatters at this stage of the war, particularly after Hitler had led the army to defeat at Stalingrad. Okay. So that's basically how I've answered the first part of it, the differ. Then I'm going to move across to what's similar about the sources. And really there's not a lot, and that's why the first impression was as it was. But we can see that this issue, the theme of morale, okay, is something that these sources agree on. Source A claims that morale was high and that faith in Hitler was secure. Okay, where source B claims that the Allied bombing of Germany actually strengthened the resolve. So they both agree that morale is at a decent standard. There wasn't a repeat of November 1918, and the German people kept their heads down and were resigned to their fate. It's my own knowledge to link into that. Another way that's similar, both imply there was no rush to overthrow Hitler. I've taken that straight from the Marx scheme, but I think it's a fair point, okay? That you would think at this stage maybe someone would be trying to overthrow him, but that's just not happening. So where do we go? Well, in our conclusion, at first it appears these two sources differ considerably. I got the tone. For me, that was the impression. So we get a different impression. As long as you justify it, that's okay. But that was the impression for me. The tone is significantly different. They disagree on the outcome of the war, and they disagree on the support for the regime. Upon closer inspection, we can see that there are some similarities. Both make reference to an increase in morale. That said, it is fair to say that the sources differ to a large extent, because on the majority of areas they do differ. So what general advice would I give you then for answering this question that's come from this mock exam? First of all, we always look to start with the first impression. Always start with that. That'll lead you nicely in. These sources seem similar, these sources seem different. The key point, always be talking about themes. Don't ever say source A says, source B says. Don't start your paragraphs with that. And when you are talking about the themes, split them up. Okay, some of you had one section that agreed, one section that disagreed. It was difficult for me to draw out exactly what themes fitted into which parts. There was overlap and stuff like that. And finally, this idea of a plan, even if it is just very brief and it's just something that you do as you are reading through the sources, get some kind of plan down together. And the last thing, I guess, that's a bit of advice is to, in your conclusion, directly answer the question. Yeah, because it's not asking you about anything other than to what extent the two sources, differ. That must be where you finish.